in this lesson, we'll go through the basics of sculpting in ZBrush. So again, kind of starting out slow, but that's okay. There's a lot to learn here in ZBrush. So let's first draw out what we want to sculpt on, right? So we have our base geometry. Let's bring in just a sphere. We'll draw it onto the canvas, go to edit mode, and we do want this to be a polymesh. When you're going to be sculpting, you want to have a polymesh. And so when we sculpt on this, it's going to be, the sculpt is going to happen based on a few different things. So it's going to be based on the settings that we have up here at the top, and also the brush and stroke and alphas that we have selected over here. Right now we just have a standard brush, so we'll stick with that for the moment. Let's subdivide our model. So remember, Control D to subdivide, and let's just subdivide it until it gets pretty smooth there. So something like that. Okay, so we have our brush size, and you can see as I hover over the model, it actually sticks to the model, showing you where you're going to be sculpting. Okay, and again, the draw size determines the size of this outer ring, and then the focal shift is how it falls off. So if we were to decrease this focal shift, we would have no fall off versus a very soft fall off if we increase it. So you can see it's sort of a relationship between that inner ring and the outer ring. Okay, so with Z add turned on and the intensity at about 25, I'm just going to stroke across the sphere, and this is what we get. Okay, so that's this combination of the standard brush with this stroke. We're adding, so we're pulling out from the surface with this intensity. If we change the intensity, it's still pulling out, but it's pulling out a very low amount, or it's really pulling it out. Okay. Now we can also turn on Z sub, so we could push into the surface. So you can see it cutting into the surface. Now the cool thing is you can switch back and forth between adding and subtracting very quickly. So if I come in here and I add a stroke, if I hit the Alt key, I'm actually going to do the opposite. Okay. So Alt, and you can see the little minus come up there. Alt is going to allow me, and if I have Z add or Z sub selected instead, Alt's going to allow me to bring it out. So it'll basically just toggle between these. Okay. Shift will allow you to smooth out the result. So holding down Shift, you can see my brush changes to smooth. And now as I go over this, it's actually just smoothing out the result. So if you get something that's a little bit too jagged, we can just smooth it out. So you can see here the smoothing taking effect. So you can really come in here and we could create kind of a hole. And then by hitting Alt, we could do like a rim around it, like a crater, and then Shift would allow you to kind of just smooth out the result. So you can really go back and forth with that. And you can see you're just kind of treating it like clay. Now there are different kinds of strokes and alphas. So right now we're not using an alpha, we are using a dot stroke, and that's letting us just draw out these series of dots which are so close they create the illusion that this is, or they create the effect that this is raised up in a single line. But we can also, for instance, use a drag rectangle stroke, and we could come in here and use different alphas. So I could bring in an alpha like that, and we could draw out an instance of this. And if we wanted to go to Z add, we could change that as well. So lots of different methods for doing that. Okay, and that's a combination of this special stroke, okay, and also this alpha. If we use this alpha with a different stroke, you can see you get kind of a different effect. So it's kind of like a brush tip in a way. And again, you can click on that, just turn alpha off if you want to, and you're back to where you started. Now there are lots of different kinds of brushes. You can activate your brushes by hitting the B key, and that'll open up all of our different brushes. And then if you know the names of your brushes, you can sort of kind of dial them in like that. So if you're looking for like a clay brush, you can hit the C key. That'll kind of narrow it down to everything that starts with a C. And then you can kind of see, okay, clay buildup is B. So I know that I can hit B. So in this case, we could say, okay, I'm just going to hit B, C, B, and I know that's the combination to get the clay buildup brush. The clay buildup brush will give you more the effect of building up real material. So you can see it's got these sort of hard edges and gives you a very kind of sculptural feel to it versus the standard brush. Okay, another really cool brush is Stamian's standard brush, which will allow you to cut into the surface and create these sort of creases just like that. And if you were to use the Alt key, you could create kind of a raised look just like that. And there's so many brushes in here, they actually don't all fit in here. And so you can go into Lightbox under Brush, and there's all different kinds of really cool brushes that you can look at. So I'd encourage you to check those out. You've got really cool flattened brushes, and there's some really cool planar brushes that do some really neat things. And so you can really experiment with those, and so you're not just stuck with the brushes that are here, which you could spend a lot of time just looking at these brushes. Now, in addition to that, let's go back to the standard brush. So I'm going to choose, let's go back out of Lightbox, go into brushes. I'm just going to hit S and T to go to standard brush. Now, a lot of times we'll be working with something that is symmetrical. And so we can come in here and activate symmetry, and you can hit the X key to do that. But you can also do it under the transform palette, and you can choose the axis you want this to be. And you can see we get kind of a preview dot there. And so we can come in, and now whatever we do is symmetrical. And so we can really quickly create some symmetrical objects just by using that. You can also use, do symmetry in a different axis. So in the Z axis, you could have symmetry that way. Or we could even have radial symmetry. So let me choose an axis here. And so we could have radial symmetry where it's doing it in a circle. Okay, so go ahead and experiment on just a sphere. You've got Z add and Z sub. Remember, Alt will help you move, kind of toggle back and forth between those, and your intensity will determine how far up or into the surface that you sculpt. Also, the brush, or the draw size rather, and the focal shift will determine kind of the sharpness of it and also the size of the stroke. Okay, and then you also have the different brushes that you can experiment with. Remember, you can narrow those down based on the letter. The strokes, and we'll talk, we'll get more into this as we go, but I want you to have some time to experiment with it. And then the alpha will let you get kind of a tip on the brush that'll let you get different effects. And again, it's also based on the stroke that you have selected. Okay, so that's a look at just sculpting. Let's take a look at poly painting, which is the method of creating color and texture in ZBrush. So we'll talk about that next.